Welcome to the GotBooks show. I'm your host, Timothy C. Ward. I have the pleasure of introducing you to our guest today, JP Barnett.
Hi there.
JP, so public service announcement in case this helps with the context. We've talked already, and I broke the golden rule of podcasting to record the podcast. So uh, if I accidentally say, you remember that last one that we did where I said something better and then you answered really great, do that. Like if I say something like that, that's why, because I've done this. And so thank you, JP, for coming on again.
Of course, no problem.
So JP Barnett is a fellow Evolved author, Evolved publishing author. I'm up to book 6 in his creature feature horror series called Lorestalker. And we wanted to get him on the show because the one of his books, The Kraken of Cape Madre, is on sale for 99 cents this week. So we wanted to let you know about that. And I'm gonna equip my GoGo Gadget screen share so that we can see some cool images for JP's books. So this one that I just brought up is The Kraken of Cape Madre. How would you, so first of all, I sort of let the cat out of the bag calling these creature feature books. How would you describe your Lorestalker series?
Yeah, so I would describe them as creature feature horrors. I think that's accurate. But the whole thing has kind of evolved, no pun intended, as the series has gone on. Usually at events, I describe them as horror, urban fantasy, adventure. So it's kind of a mix of things because the horror is not super dark. It's not scary. Generally happy endings in my stuff. If people die, they probably had it coming, or you don't care about them, one or the other. So yeah, I think by adding the words adventure and urban fantasy, it kind of tames them down, which is accurate for them, I think. But creature feature is also accurate because everyone features a creature, so you can't go wrong with that description either.
So one of the things that I enjoy about it is it reminds me of one of my favorite series, Dan Simmons' Summer of Night, because it's like, so that one a little bit older, but it has kids in it, and they're riding their bikes around, and then all of a sudden a vampire comes to town and they have to fight it. And I loved how that book is self-contained. Um, it's not entirely about the monster. It's more so about how the kids are relating to each other as they're trying to survive the monster. And I enjoy the same aspect of your series. I feel like each one is very self-contained in the setting and the creature of the feature, essentially. It's very focused. So I've really enjoyed it and the character as well. What are some of the ways that the series ties together?
So the main through line of the entire series is my characters. Every book is, like as you mentioned, self-contained, and I wrote them with that intention in mind. So you could kind of jump in the middle, read it, you wouldn't be lost. And that was a challenge, but that was also a goal. And so the through line for the series is mainly Miriam with a little side dose of Macy, and those are the two kind of main characters of the series. They're both college age girls. Miriam is the daughter of a cryptozoologist, and she was raised in a very, I don't want to say barbaric way, but maybe she might say that. She was raised in to be a hunter, to be, someone who doesn't have friends, doesn't have feelings. And so her arc through the whole series and how she grows is, I would say, the main through line. And then Macy's got her own through line because she grew up in this small Texas town. She's kind of sheltered. She doesn't really have super high confidence in her abilities. And so her growing is kind of a parallel to Miriam's journey. And those through lines, I think, are the main thing that ties the whole series together and what you really gain by reading all of them or reading them in order.
I really enjoyed Miriam's struggles with her father and that calling, like what she was born into, and how things change once you're in it. I feel like I can relate to that. Do you want to go into that at all? I know that there's progression through the series. We learn more about that. Is there anything you can say as far as that focus for her character arc?
Yeah. I really, well, first of all, as you said, it's relatable. It's highly relatable to me. I actually grew up with a single parent home. I had a few stepdads along the way, so like I would have like father figures in and out. And so I think that that is just a topic of interest to me in general, like the way one relates to one's father, because I don't have one. Um, but also, especially with the Kraken of Cape Madre, I really wanted to kind of explore this idea of like the things that you get from your parents that you keep and the things that you get from your parents that you don't keep. Because I think all of us, we have some traits we got from our parents we like, some traits we don't. Unless you had saints for parents, and very few of us did, I think. So I really like, especially with Kraken, but even into Witch, when I told her that idea that she could explore the things she liked from her father, despite kind of not liking him and not liking the childhood she had, there were still things that she got from that childhood that she could embrace and make her own and not feel like that's like a betrayal, right? And I think that that's something that a lot of people struggle with. And I know I did as I got older, like take the good things, throw away the bad things. And that isn't weakness, right? That is just an acceptance. So
So the Kraken of Cape Madre is the book that's on sale, and technically on Amazon it's listed as the second book. But when we were talking before, you mentioned that you feel like you could start there. Even would you elaborate on that just for our audience?
yeah, absolutely. I usually recommend people start at the Kraken of Cape Madre. Actually, I did write the Beast of Rose Valley first, and it is first in the series. But if I could do it all over, I would probably call the Beast of Rose Valley a prequel. The main characters in the Beast of Rose Valley are completely different. They're actually the parents of Macy and the parents of Miriam, and you find out how Macy and Miriam meet and how they become roommates and end up on these adventures together. And the main reason for that is really accidental. Like when I wrote the Beast of Rose Valley, I didn't have a series in mind. And then kind of for me, Miriam came in, stuck her flag in the sand and was like, I will not go away. And that's who I wanted to write about going forward. So that's who the series became about. And for that reason, functionally, The Beast of Rose Valley is really a prequel, despite being the first in the series and having been written first.
I was thinking about that because I like to read horror, and one of my favorite authors in horror, Ronald Malfi, doesn't really have a series. They're all standalones, and
Mhm.
so I sort of get that. Maybe it's easier for me to read a horror book that feels like a standalone. Maybe I'm expecting that, but the way that the Beast of Rose Valley worked out, I think that it. I mean, I've enjoyed all the books in the series, but I enjoyed how the Beast of Rose Valley um, has that setup, but it's also very much specifically about the Beast of Rose Valley. And so, if you start at the Kraken or there, I think either would work out. Um, the end of Beast Rose Valley does help. Like I enjoyed it, like because that was the first one I read. At the end, I'm like, oh, okay, I kind of see how this could expand to more adventures, more cryptids. So either way, I think folks will be fine. If you start with the Kraken, it was a lot of fun. Um, Many times in my head, release the Kraken quote came up. I was excited as they were fighting this thing. A little bit of a twist too to Kraken mythology. Um, Anything you want to speak to about research for how you handle books like this, or maybe even specifically the Kraken for the monsters that you pick?
Yeah, so research is a multi-layered thing. The first bit is every one of these books is written about the lore of a different cryptid that I already knew about because I am already a fan of cryptids and it's something that I loved when I was a kid. I actually have a book here that I got from my grandmother. She bought it in 1988. It's called Mysterious Creatures. It's a issue of the Mysteries of the Unknown. Yeah, I can show it to you on the camera. So this one's called Mysterious Creatures. And this whole series was like you ordered it on TV and they sent you a book a month. And for whatever reason, my grandmother signed up for it. So I went to her house on the weekends and I would read these books over and over again. And this one's even got, these got fingerprints in it. And I'm pretty sure that's 9-year-old Josh. I could have it forensically tested, I guess. But I still use this book as a reference. So it's an amazing book. It really covers the high level of like a bunch of the big cryptids like Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster and all that. It's got like amazing like photographs and illustrations. And I remember just being enamored by like this giant Bigfoot plaster cast and stuff. So that's kind of step one for me, is that high level that I go to this book, I'll go to Wikipedia, read that, kind of refresh myself on whatever I know. And then it's digging in, and you can get to all kinds of weird corners of the internet of personal anecdotes and YouTube videos and creepypastas. And I like to read it all. And then with all of my cryptids, I try to put a little bit of a twist on them. So I try not to make them just straight, oh yeah, it's an animal we've never heard of. I try to make it more than that. And I try to make each one a different kind of twist as well. And that just comes from my imagination and my unwillingness to be boring, I guess.
That's a good ambition in life. I'm not so sure how well I've done, but here we go. We've got a show, so it's going to be entertaining. What excites you most about this being the series that you've written and these characters? I know that you've touched on with Miriam's art, but is there anything else about the characters that you've been excited to produce for this?
Yeah, there's a lot of different elements. The Beast of Rose Valley especially is very personal in that I base a lot of it on my personal life. It takes place in a fictional version of my hometown, because I grew up in a town of 2,000 people in Texas. The character Jake took a lot of cues from me as well, in that he was a software engineer, I was a software engineer. And at the beginning of the book, he's actually stepped away from that. And I had done the same thing. I was a software engineer. I kind of got a burnout on it. I stepped away and I was going to try to write a book. My wife was like, you can do it, but only in 6 months, and you got to go back to work. So I did. But then I got published and then I stayed with it. So I've been writing ever since. So there are definitely characters like that. And I know I've already mentioned Miriam, but if you don't mind me sharing a particular story about Miriam as a character and what she means to me, when I first wrote her in the Beast of Rose Valley, she's not a huge character. I mean, she's important to the story, but she's not a huge character. But the chapters that she does have, my editor, Mike Robinson, when he edited it, he pushed back and he was like, she's not very relatable. She's very robotic. She kind of feels like distant. And in my heart, I was just like, that's how she's supposed to be. Like, we're not changing it. Like that, I stood my ground on that one. And for all the other stuff, I changed. And as the series went on, I got that feedback a lot. That even as I kind of expanded her character, people was like, well, she's, and then people started saying, well, maybe she's autistic, maybe she's on the spectrum. And I was like, no, she's on the spectrum, because like she's like me. I relate to her. She's on the spectrum. Anyway, long story short, I ended up getting diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder at the age of 42 because I wrote the character Miriam, and that kind of led me down that path of self-exploration. So that was a story that I didn't really share until if you read the acknowledgments of the last book, The Legacy of Rose Valley, that's where I actually share that story. But yeah, so that has been extremely personal for me because it literally changed my life, all because I wrote this character. And it's a great journey as a character for her because she doesn't know that about herself in the same way that I didn't know about myself. And I think that changes a lot. And I think it also makes her a much more authentic character than she might have been otherwise.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. It's hard to um, come to grips with hard facts in our life.
Yeah.
I've enjoyed seeing her. I didn't think that she was robotic, so that I don't know. I'm missing that part, I guess, but I've enjoyed her, and I don't know. I think the thing that I really honed in on was her desire to please her dad, I suppose, and live up to the expectations and live up to the um, steep learning curve, high cliffs of calling. I mean, however you want to put it, she's got a tough one to walk through, and so I've enjoyed that.
Yeah, thanks.
Another thing that's special about you and for our audience is you're a convention guy. So you've been to a bunch of conventions to sell your books and have met readers through that. Um, just for for the writing experience, how has going to the conventions helped you writing a series? Did you start at book one and start going, or when did you start?
Yeah, the first event I ever did, I had two books. So I had the Kraken and the Beast. And the first one I did was a paranormal conference in San Antonio, Texas. It was like 95 degrees outside. It was horrible, temperature wise. But that was when I started, and I've been doing it ever since. It's been a huge component of my career as a writer. Um, and not only do you like, I get to meet people who read the books, and then I've been fortunate in that I do a lot of events. I live in Seattle now. I do a lot of events here, and I'll have people come back for more books. So they'll buy a book, read it, come back, get more the next time I'm in town, and that I'm very fortunate to have that. But also the great part about that is I get to talk to them about the books, and I get to find out what they liked. And so I've learned a lot about the kind of people who are drawn to my books, the audience that's reading it. There's certainly different subsets. So there's people who just like they love cryptids, and there's not a ton of cryptid fiction out there. So they're just excited to have a book about Bigfoot or a book about the Kraken or whatever their favorite cryptid is. I get a lot of people who really like to have strong female protagonists, which Miriam is, and so people like that. And another thing that I found is that families really like to read my books, which I didn't expect at all. But they're approachable enough. They're not young adult, but they're approachable enough to younger readers that 12, 13 and up can read them no problem. And so I've had a lot of families, and they'll buy the books, and then the whole family will read them, and they'll like talk about them and stuff. And that's really cool and something I didn't expect. And in general, in the whole series, I learned from these events that younger readers like my books, even though that's not who I targeted them towards. And so and they're more likely my bread and butter when it comes to conventions. They're the people most often buy my books. They just have more time to read, I think, than adults. The adults are more likely to pick up a card and be like, "Are these an audiobook?" And I'll be like, "They are," and they're like, "Okay, I'll check them out there." But the teenagers, they're all about it, and so yeah, that's been very helpful. And I think as the series goes on, I've actually kind of tailored the books more for those audiences that I've met at conventions.
What's the size range for the books? Like,
Size?
yeah, page wise or
They're about 70 to 75,000 words a piece, which works out to, I don't know, 200, almost 300 pages. I think Haunted Hong is the shortest one. I think the Legacy of Rose Valley is the longest one. So they're pretty short, and I intended them to be that way. I can't handle long books. I tend to never finish books if they're too long. So when I started writing books, I also did not want them to be too long. My goal is you should be able to read it on a long plane ride. If you got like a 5-hour plane ride across the country, I want you to be able to read my book and enjoy it. Um, so that's kind of the size I'd go for.
yeah, that makes sense. Um, any breakthroughs that you've had with writing this series as far as
Um,
your writing process or even just your craft?
Oh, absolutely. So before I wrote The Beast of Rose Valley, I had written a novel in like eighth grade for funsies and short stories. So I'd never written like a proper novel before. And when I wrote The Beast of Rose Valley, I didn't know what I didn't know, and in some ways that made it the easiest of all the books because I just wrote, and I didn't know if it was good, and I didn't care if it was good, and I just kind of enjoyed it. And going through the editing process for that was brutal. It was the most intense editing process of any of the books because I hadn't really learned the game yet. So that's part of it. And then something that I run into just is just how I write books. I don't outline, so I just kind of start writing. I have the basic premise in mind, and I start going. And inevitably, in every one of my books, about a third to halfway through, I get to the point where I'm like, if I keep going the way I'm going, this book will be way too short. So I have to introduce something new, and I have a term for it, but it'd be a bit of a spoiler, so I won't say it here. But in my own head, I call it something based on what happened in the Kraken of Cape Madre. And so now, when I get to that point in the book, I'm like, okay, it's time to do this thing, and generally, it amounts to torture somebody in some way, make life harder for them and keep digging a hole. And so I learned that I need to do that as part of my process. And um, early on with the Beast of Rose Valley, I wasn't sure it was going to be a series, so I started writing a different book instead, and I outlined that book, and I started writing it, and I wanted nothing to do with it. After I outlined it, I was done. I didn't care anymore. So for me, I learned that discovering the story is like 90% of the fun for me. That's why I like to write it, is because I kind of discover it as I go, and things come to me as I go. And a lot of times, I feel like the characters write the stories. There's been times where I was like, this is what's going to happen, and I got to that point in the book, and it's like Miriam wouldn't do that, or Macy wouldn't do that. And that has steered a lot of the books, especially the Legacy of Rose Valley. It was going to be very different than it ended up being, all because hinging on just the way I thought Macy would actually behave versus the way I wanted her to behave for the sake of the plot. So yeah, learned a lot.
And is the series complete for this with the 6 books?
It is, yeah, it is complete. So in September was the last book. It's called The Legacy of Rose Valley. It is the only book in the series that I would never recommend someone read out of order, because it brings in something from every other book, whether it's a creature or a character or a plot point. So it is one big. My goal was to just jump the shark as hard as I could. That's what I always told people. I didn't care how silly it got. I was bringing back everything I could. So I'm really proud of the finale. It actually turned out better than I expected, given excuse me, given how crazy it was in my head. But yeah, so that finished up in September, and I'm off starting a new series now that hopefully first book will come out later in the year.
What's the new series called?
So the new series is called Backseat Demons, and the first book in the series is called Outer Demons. And the whole premise is it's Exorcist meets Tommy Boy. So it is about a unintentional possession of a woman by a demon. Both of them want out of the relationship, and they can't get away from each other except to find an exorcist, which is hard to find in 2024. So they take a road trip to find an exorcist, and that is the premise. It's kind of going to veer a little bit more into horror comedy than the Lorestalker series, but I think it's a gentle turn, because I think, as I mentioned, the Lorestalker series is not terribly dark, and I'm just going to keep that going and maybe add a little bit of comedy. So I'm writing that now, and I'm excited about it. It is hard to start a new series for sure, because it almost was autopilot with Lorestalker at the end, and now I'm having to kind of go back to the drawing board on a lot of stuff, but I'm enjoying it.
Sounds great. I love horror comedy. It's a good
Yeah.
it's a good rebound to go from scared to laughing. It's like a fresh start. So if you can do that well, especially the buddy cop type of thing, I think that'll be great. I expect it to be enjoyable. So nice work. I look forward to reading that.
I look forward to reading it as well when I finish it.
Yeah, well, there are some books I finished I don't want to read ever again.
As
What's
authors, we have to read our books so many times, it gets painful when you're going through the editing process.
yeah. Is that going to be with Evolved Publishing, or what are you doing?
It is.
Okay.
Yep. That's going to be with Evolved Publishing. It's going to be a 2-book series, so it's just a duology. So I'll be finished with that one way quicker than I was Lorestalker. I'm hoping that I get one out this year, one out next year. And yep. We're already working on the covers. I think I get to have the final proofs of those last night, actually. And I'm excited. I'll probably be doing cover reveals and all that in the next couple months as we get closer.
Nice. I will put your website, jpbarnett.com, in the show notes so folks can find you there. Any
Awesome.
news or events for you?
I am always doing events. As I mentioned, is a big component of my career. So if you live in the Seattle area at all, I'll be doing a couple of really big events coming up. I'm doing NorwestCon, which is a science fiction writing convention at the end of next month, end of March. Sorry, we are in next month now, the end of March. And then at the end of April, I am doing Crypticon, which is the Pacific Northwest's biggest celebration of the macabre. I forgot exactly what their tagline is. It was something like that. It's a horror convention though. So I will be at both of those conventions, both with my books and on panels. So if you're in the Seattle area, come check me out.
Nice. I'm in Iowa, so that's a bit far for me.
It's a bit far.
I've been to Washington for one of the World Cons. That was fun. It was a lot of
Oh yeah,
fun.
Worldcon is coming back here next year. I just got someone told me that Emerald City Comic Con this past weekend. So
Nice. See what happens next year. Maybe I'll be a half robot and I'll be able to handle it. Fly over the after the propellers that come out of my spine. It'll be fun. And then I'll be one of the attractions to the cryptid show. So
that's true. Yeah. Be very famous at Worldcon. People would just think it's cosplay.
I can't wait. So after we click out here, I'm going to put in a sample of your audio for the Kraken of Cape Madre, so folks can listen to that. And
Awesome.
check out your website. And thanks everyone for watching us, and have a great rest of your day, JP.
Yep. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
Miriam threw herself back into the waves and swam to her target. In a matter of seconds, she pulled up next to the swimmer and quickly flipped her limp body so that she faced up out of the water. Scrutinizing the girl for any injuries, Miriam winced when she saw deep purple bruises around the girl's midsection. With no pier or boat in sight, Miriam worked through the possibilities of what could have caused this girl to fall out of the sky. And maybe more importantly, what could have possibly done this to her stomach? Miriam sucked air in, working to calm herself before the long trek back. Tanner would have seen this from the shore. He would come. Miriam knew he would. Something ran into her leg, hard enough to knock her sideways. A fish, maybe? She kicked at it, forcing it to scuttle away. A splash to her left caused her to turn her head. Something floated in the water. Not floated, writhed. Its purple, slimy skin moved along the surface, skimming towards her. A wave caused it to twist, revealing a lighter pink underside and the outline of huge suction cups. An octopus? A squid? It seemed far too large for either. A slideshow of legendary creatures flipped through her head, stories from the age of pirates and Greek sailors. She needed a second set of eyes, but they were far from shore. Too far for anyone else to possibly see this. Miriam shook her head to try to make sense of it, but as the ominous tentacle moved closer, she hooked the girl under one of her arms. Kicking as hard as she could, Miriam moved towards the shoreline, desperate to put distance between them and the monster below. Sploosh! Something deep and loud. She twisted her head but kept kicking. She didn't see it anymore. Her lungs burned, her legs ached. Too much time studying, not enough time training. She pushed away the pain and swam, like her life and the life of this girl depended on it. The shore seemed forever away, but another form swam towards her, causing her to slow to meet them. Tanner? Or a lifeguard, maybe? Tanner's head popped up a few feet away. "Mir, are you okay?" Miriam nodded and transferred the unconscious swimmer to Tanner's strong arms. "Something was out there. Something—" She shook her head. "Go! Let's just go!" Together they swam until they could stand. Tanner lifted the girl in his arms, trudged through the remaining water, and laid her down on the sandy beach. Miriam collapsed next to the girl and rested an ear against her chest, listening carefully. The girl's chest rose and fell. Faintly. She coughed and convulsed, her eyelids flitting wildly. Miriam registered cheers behind them, but they seemed distant. The fact that this girl remained unconscious was bad. Very bad. Miriam worried that there might be internal bleeding. Didn't this damn beach have any lifeguards? Mesmerized by the injuries, Miriam grazed the tips of her fingers along the bruises around the girl's midsection. It looked painful, possibly life-threatening. That tentacle. It must have grabbed her. And threw her? That didn't seem possible. She pushed away her fascination and stood up. "Someone get help!" she pleaded. No one budged. "Emma!" Another teenage girl screamed from the throng, pushing through and throwing herself on the sand. She turned her tearful eyes to Miriam. "Is she okay? Is she going to be okay?" I'm not sure," Miriam stammered. "Hopefully." A rumble echoed across the beach, and the crowd parted for a red four-wheeler with a stretcher on the back. Finally! Miriam backed away, tapping Tanner on the shoulder to encourage him to do the same. The lifeguards took over, rushing to secure Emma to the stretcher before zooming her down the beach along with her friend. They paid no attention to Miriam and Tanner. Miriam collapsed to the sand, dropping her head between her legs to catch her breath. Tanner sat beside her, his hand on her back. "Nice job, Mir." She didn't want adulation. Not for this. Maybe she had saved a life today, but if she could believe her own eyes, something dangerous lurked beneath the waves. Her body begged her to relax, to let the adrenaline fade away. But her mind used it to fuel a fire that burned inside of her. Her father had trained her to hunt monsters. Maybe she'd just found one.